Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
Hi students, welcome to the session. In this session, we are going to talk about the chapter Physical Basis of Mental Life. Now, whenever we are talking about the mental ability or the person, how a person operates in his or her life, we always think about a particular body part, and that is the brain, right? And obviously there is brain being a part of the body and anatomy. We need to understand that what exactly are the different parts of the brain and how do they work and how do they help or how do they coordinate in such a way that our day to day functions can be performed, and what kind of thinking do we have, right? So all of this, for understanding all of this it is to understand the physical basis of or the physicalities of the brain, right? So when we are talking about the brain, it is very important to understand the way we think, and the structure of the brain goes hand in hand, right? There is a close relationship between mind and body, right? Now this relationship is demonstrated. Now this relationship is also demonstrated in our day-to-day life. For example, if suppose on a particular day you are not feeling well, right? You have, let's say, fever, right? So you will not be able to operate if somebody asks you to, okay, please do this work, please read this book. So you will not be able to do that, right? Because although it is the part which is the book reading is a part of a mental exercise, but you will not be able to do it. So there is a very close relationship between the mind and the body, right? Now injury or disease to a particular part of the brain produces mental disorder or loss of consciousness. This is something which is very common, and you must have heard about it many times, maybe in news, maybe you have some relation in you must have seen some disease of brain. So basically, brain being a part of the body many a times suffers through it can suffer through an injury. Like for example, let's say a person is in an accident and he or she suffers a brain trauma, right? So that trauma might affect the way the person functions, right? Then let's say if there is a disease, right, which is associated with the brain, that also causes various kind of mental disorders, or it may cause the loss of consciousness, meaning that you will not be say if a person has suffered a head trauma, that person might faint, right, may become unconscious. Many a times people also lose memory because of the same, right, because they have been hit or they have there is a trauma on the area where the memories are stored in our brain, right? So all of this, you can see that how the physical damage to the brain also affects the memory, the thinking power, and so many different things. Some of the influences of bodily conditions on mental process are matters of common observation. Now this is what it is very common, like almost all of us have a tendency to drink either tea or coffee, right? Now this is not a very huge thing. It is not something which is put in under experiments a lot, but this is something which is very common, and it shows that how it is affecting the body. Like for example, both tea and coffee contain caffeine, right? And caffeine is what it is, basically a chemical which energizes your body. Many times you will observe that people they get up in the morning and they have to have tea before they can do any other work, right? Or people have to have coffee before they can do any other work. So you can see that how the mind is dependent on tea or coffee. And on the other hand, you will find people, those who do not need these kind of stimulants, right? They don't need tea or coffee to get started with their morning, right? So but many times people, and around us we will find almost 80% of the people are either dependent on tea or coffee, and in the morning they need it, right? It is why I am using the word need, is because the mind is so dependent on these stimulants that a person is not able to function. You will find that people, those who are not those who have the habit of drinking tea and coffee, and if they do not get it, many times they will suffer from a headache or they will be irritated, right? So the whole bodily function is affected by this. You can see the influence of these outside things, right? And also you will find that the alcohol, right, a person, whenever a person drinks alcohol, that also affects on the way the mind works, right? The alcohol is able to penetrate the barriers of the brain, and it is able to affect a certain part of the brain, which affects the way a person speaks, a way a person walks, right? And it also, the person also tends to lose inhibition whenever they are consuming alcohol. So you will find that the outer influences, whether it is some beverage because of which a brain, because of which the brain is functioning in a certain way. Other influence can be, you must have heard about a process called as hypnosis, right? So it is a very, this particular process is very, you can say, a process which can control the brain in certain way, wherein a person may or may not feel pain, right? For example, a person may not feel pain when pricked by a pin under the hypnotic effect, right? On the other hand, even if when hit by, let's say, a small say pillow, then also a person might feel pain if under hypnotic influence, right? So you can see that how different things actually are able to affect the brain. So it is important to understand that which part of the brain, or out of the various parts, which part of the brain responds to what kind of influence, right? So it is important to understand the working of the brain and working of our mind. Now, advancement of behaviors in animals, like for example, if we talk about the evolution, right? So when we talk about evolution, if we talk about human beings, the evolution of human beings, we'll find that the human beings and ape, they actually started from a common ancestor and then they separated, right? So this was the juncture point where the one of the branches became the great apes and the other branch became humans. Now great apes include chimpanzees and orangutans and gorillas, and you must have seen many a times you will find that these great apes, that is the chimpanzees and the gorillas, they actually show they show cognitive abilities. That means they are able to understand things, they are able to perceive various emotions, and they are pretty intelligent, but they are not as intelligent as human beings. So evolution also, the way a particular species evolves, has also a lot to do with what kind of evolution is happening in the brain. As and when the brain starts developing, we will see that if we compare the brain, if you look at the gorilla, it's a huge ape, and obviously if you measure the brain of that gorilla, you will find that the brain is very large, right? But what kind of evolution has taken place which makes human beings more intelligent as compared to gorillas, right? Gorillas are also equally intelligent. Chimpanzees and orangutans are being studied for their intelligence level, and they have proved to be highly intelligent beings, right? Highly intelligent apes. But they do not compare to the ability like the ability that we have, right? So there are a lot of researches going on between the comparing the brain of a chimpanzee or a human being, and it is found it is basically determined that the evolution of brain corresponds to that of intelligence, right? So as and when the brain evolved, right, the intelligence of a particular species also evolved, right? So obviously evolution of brain is very, very important for evolution of a species, because whenever the things change around us, right, it is our brain which helps us to accommodate with the change or change according to that change which is happening in the environment, right? So this is very important to understand. Emotional life is closely connected with thalamus, sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. In the progressing chapter, when we are going to learn about all of these systems of brain, you will be able to understand that how these parts affect the brain, emotional or the emotional intelligence that we have, right? So now let's move ahead and talk about the nervous system of human beings. So nervous system of human beings is basically divided into two parts. First is the central nervous system, that is the CNS, and then you have the peripheral nervous system, that is the PNS, right? Central nervous system has two important parts. One is the brain, another is the spinal cord, right? Then you have the peripheral nervous system, which includes the sensory pathways, and you have the motor pathways, The motor pathways are two types. One, we have voluntary, that is the somatic nervous system, and you have the autonomic nervous system, which is also called as ANS. Right? Then ANS is further divided into sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions. Now, about all of these we are going to study in detail. What do we understand by a sensory pathway? What is a motor pathway? What is voluntary or ANS? Right? All of this is what we are going to study in this particular session. Right?